So in today's gospel, we encounter a powerful moment between Jesus and the assumptions of the Pharisees, so the ruling Jewish leaders of that time. The disciples see a man who has been blind from birth and immediately ask a question that reflects a common belief in the ancient world. They say, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Their assumption is simple and a bit harsh. We know the ancient world in the first century was a bit of a rough place at times. But the presumption or the assumption is that suffering must be someone's fault. I think we can all relate to that. I think it's our human nature to want to place blame when things don't go right or unexpected bad things happen to us. Many people in that time believed that if someone was born with a disease, a deformity, or an abnormality, it had to be connected to sin. Somebody must be at fault. Perhaps the parents had done something wrong. Perhaps the child had somehow sinned in the womb. In their worldview, physical suffering was almost always interpreted as punishment, right? As being held accountable to their sins. But Jesus, and religion gets it wrong sometimes, but Jesus gets it so right here. He immediately rejects this way of thinking. He says, neither he nor his parents sinned. It is so that the works of God might be made visible through him. This is a profound insight and correction for how maybe religion can kind of get it wrong in praxis or in practice. Jesus is teaching us that suffering is not always the result of someone's sin. Not every illness, disability, or hardship is punishment from God. Instead, it is an opportunity for God to be revealed, even the most difficult ones, to reveal his glory. The focus really shifts from blame, right? That may be our initial mindset. How did this happen, right? We ask those questions when things go wrong. It shifts from blame to grace, right? God's freely given love. Rather than asking who caused this, Jesus asks quite a different question. How will God reveal his love through this? The most memorable example that I encountered in my ministry toward priesthood of this way of questioning being lived out was about 12 years ago. I wasn't ordained a priest yet, but I remember I helped lead a program called Service Works at my home parish, St. Augustine's, for 8th graders preparing for confirmation. And every day, I remember these two young ladies who I thought were twins were picked up by their parents every single day like clockwork in the afternoon when the program ended. It turns out they were triplets. The parents would always bring the third to pick them up. 2 of the children were born healthy, and one of them was born with autism due to complications at birth. At first glance, someone might look at this situation and only see the tremendous difficulty or the tremendous uphill road ahead. Raising any child for those parents out there is demanding. We know that, but I don't know that, but you know that. But caring for 3 at once, plus a child with special needs, wow, this requires divine patience, sacrifice, and love. But something remarkable happened in their family. When I met with the parents toward the end of this summer camp, it was a 2-week program, the parents began to speak to me about how their daughter with autism transformed not just them, but their entire household. She slowed them down. She taught them patience. She forced them to communicate differently. She helped her siblings learn compassion and gentleness in ways that they would never have otherwise. In many ways, she became the center of their family's love because of her immediate needs. What might appear to the world as a burden actually became a profound source of grace. And through her life, the works of God were made visible. That family learned how to love more authentically, more selflessly, and more deeply. And that's exactly the point that Jesus is trying to make in today's gospel. The man born blind is not simply someone to be pitied. His life becomes the place where God's power and mercy can be revealed. Through his healing, people witness the compassion of Christ and the truth that God does not abandon us in our suffering. The message is still greatly important for us today. We live in a culture that often tries to eliminate or hide weakness or imperfection. There is a temptation to measure human value by productivity, ability, or independence. But this gospel teaches us something very, very different, that every human life, no matter how fragile, disabled, or vulnerable, has immense dignity. Sometimes the people who seem the weakest in the eyes of the world are actually the ones who reveal the deepest truths about love. They teach us patience. They teach us sacrifice. And they teach us how to see one another, not as problems to be solved, but as gifts to be cherished. The blind man in today's gospel becomes a witness to God's glory, and the child with autism in that family became the teacher of authentic love. Who would have thought? And in our own lives, the struggles we face, whether illness, hardship, or limitations, can also become those places where God's grace shines through us. So instead of asking, why did this happen? Perhaps the better question is, how will God reveal his love through this moment?